is a name of the deity, and it's the personification, the invocation of the name of God, which brings to consciousness out of the primordial, the darkness, the chaos before creation, by invoking the name of the deity, it brings to consciousness, to manifestation, everything that we see in the world. And for us, within the creation, it brings to consciousness everything in the spiritual world. So that name in the spiritual world, the name is non-different from the thing. In the material world, a thing and its name are not synonymous. But spiritual names, holy names, partake of the nature of the deity himself, and as such, to invoke the presence of to invoke the name of God is to invoke the very presence of the deity himself. So actually, when one considers the story about Buddha and the fact that the cult of Ta in Egypt was still alive and well at the time of the incarnation of Buddha, then remembering the story, when Buddha was approached and asked whether he was an incarnation of the deity, his response was, Aham Buddha, from this root here, Aham Buddha. And it's been translated, I am awake. It could equally well be carried through and not translated, and simply said that he responded with a statement that he was Pata. He was in fact Vishnu. He was in fact an incarnation of this particular form of the deity. Also, it's interesting to note that this particular form of the deity, as I mentioned before, was particularly a lot of these Stoics or the Greeks and the great scholars and intellectuals of the Mediterranean in the Greco-Egyptian cultists or Asila Federation cultists, they worshipped particularly this form of the Creator as Ptah. And so the fact that the cultists of both the Mahayana form of Buddhism and also the so-called earlier Theravadan, which was obviously not earlier than the Mahayana, but that the tremendous intellectual association involved in that particular in Buddhism seems to be related to the fact that Buddha was one of the forms of the deity that the Stoics and the various philosophers were very interested in worshiping. All of the strings have a head bead, which represents the deity. And the Vaishnava, Buddhist, and Muslim beads are used to repeat the name of God, and the Catholic to repeat prayers containing his names, and in Eastern tradition sometimes just the names of God also. When one is repeating the name of God, one is to meditate on the person, the attributes, the pastimes of the particular form of the deity. And so oftentimes the prayers are particular amongst the different Vaishnava groups to the form of the deity that is worshipped at that temple or amongst that particular group of Vaishnavas. The Maha Mantra contains three of the most important names of God, and seems to have been very widespread because the forms of the deity that are invoked by it are of course, original forms of the deity, and these are very prominent names of the original forms of the deity. So there are indications of this Mahamantra in the Western world, and it appears to have been something that was kept or became esoteric to a large extent for a very long time, and in the East, and it was really revived to an enormous extent about 500 years ago by Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, whose present school of Vaishnavism contains the greatest synthesis of ancient Vaishnava teachings, including that of the other major sampradayas or schools of Vaishnavism, besides the origin of the Chaitanyite school, which was the Brahma Surya Sampradaya of Vaishnavism. So that the existing Brahma Surya Sampradaya of Vaishnavism as coming from Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu is actually really an enormous religio-cultural arc in which has been preserved the doctrines and practices of all the ancient forms of Vaishnavism to the modern time in an extraordinarily pristine state. Again, the whole purpose of chanting the names of God can be described in a manner that is used both in the East and the West if you read the devotees' writings on it, and that's that God is very concerned with us, and He loves us all equally. It's not that He is playing favorites, but we have some independence, and just as the parent is always loves all the children the same, is very solicitous for their welfare, they have their independence, and the parent doesn't want to interfere. But when the child calls for the parent, and calls on the name of the mother, for instance, then immediately the mother comes or the father comes, and whatever the child's need is, then the parent can fulfill it. And the Lord is the mother and the father of us all, and He always has time for us, and nothing is too small for His attention, and He always enjoys our association, and He's always there to encourage us and to inspire us and to teach us. And it's not that sometimes He's there and others He isn't, so that He only comes when we call. He doesn't need us to remind Him that we are here, but He is always there for us. We need to call on His name, because it's our tendency in this age to become unconscious of our need and to forget our relationship. So actually, our own invocation of the names of God is a way to keep us in constant contact and constant consciousness of our relationship to Him, and in constant contact and communication with God. And while we are calling on the names of God, because God is non-different from His name. In the material world, we are not the same as our name, but God is non-different from His name. When we are calling on the names of God, in each of one of the great traditions, it is considered that we are actually associating with God, because His name is holy, sacred, and partakes of the nature of God Himself. One thing I forgot to mention about the tonsures is that in addition to special tonsures for the priests and for different stages of life, there were also tonsures for different elements of Vaishnava society. For instance, the Nazarites, which were Jews, very strict Jews, just as they had dietary differences and so forth with the other Jews, they also, if they were members of one of the Kshatriya clans or groups of Jews, warriors, when they took the vow of the Nazarite, then they stopped cutting their hair and their beard entirely. And this can be seen, for example, in Samson. And the fascinating thing about this is that also in Vaishnavism, for instance, in the story of Rukmi, the brother of Rukmini, it's said that he lost his potency, some of his power, when Krishna cut off his hair, locks. And the idea is that amongst the Kshatriyas, the allowing of the hair to grow long was associated with their vow in the West, for instance, their vow of the Nazarene. And when it could be taken for a whole lifetime or for a period of time. And when the person decided to break the vow or to end the vow or the special dedication or devotion to God, then they would cut their hair off. So this is a very interesting connection there. Another important thing about hair cutting is that many of these Kshatriyas who were devoted, they were like saintly warriors that let their hair grow long. Some of them also shaved their faces, and the reason why they shaved their faces is because they were, as devotees of the Korai, Helios and Dionysus, they were kind of identifying themselves as eternal youths, and just as the phony sacred kings, they let their hair grow long and they shaved their faces so that they were like the Korai, or the youths whose hair was long until their beards started to grow. And that time in Greece, the young men would shave their hair, and they would pass through the rites of manhood and stop being a koros, or youth. So that up to a certain age, until they started having a beard, they would be the koros, or youth, and that class of society. And then they would have cut their long hair. So that after they cut their long hair, then they would be officially a man of the community. Oops, I touched the microphone. Anyway, after they cut their long hair, they would be a man of the community and might enter householder life or something like that. The companions of Heracles and Hippocles, the legendary duo kings of the Spartans and the Argives, who seem to be somewhat of a partly remembered Balaram and Krishna. And Balaram and Krishna as Heracles and Hippocles, or whatever element of them was involved in that bunch of stories, were the sacred kings, as I said, and the one was the warrior king and the other was kind of a priest king. Well, the whole business about the Spartans shaving their faces and growing their hair long at one period of time was associated with their idea that they were companions of Heracles, and as such they had this long hair, and they were very proud of this long hair, and they felt their power was in it. And it's described in ancient sources how other armies would always be terrified by the Spartans and their attitude towards war, and how astounded they would be when the spies would go and look at the Spartan encampments and find that before the battle the Spartans would be sitting around calmly combing and putting up their very long hair, and when they went into battle, they would have drummers with them and musicians playing hand cymbals, and they would go into battle singing very beautiful, joyful, happy hymns, and they seemed to be absolutely without any fear whatsoever, and they were following their leader, like the Korai or the boys following Krishna, and that's the mood that they would go into battle with. In Exodus, of course, we know that prior to the Exodus, the Hebrews had begun, Israelites had begun eating onions, leeks, and garlics, and some other things that were part of the Egyptian diet at the time. And during the Exodus, they had none of these things. They also had no meat or fish or fowl, and of course part of the whole thing was the no-leavened bread business. The Passover is very, very important. And during the time when the Exodus is being remembered, of course, and the sacrifice of the firstborn of Egypt, that is strictly forbidden to have any leaven found in the household of the practicing Jews. Now, there's the interesting passage about the Valley of Sin, where the people were complaining that they had no meat and they had no onions, leeks, or garlics, and why in the world did we ever leave Egypt? We are really enjoying what we're eating back there, and out here all we have is this heavenly bread. And Moses, of course, was very angry, and God was very angry with the people, and he said, okay, they want meat to eat, I'll give them meat. And there was this great wind and flock of quail that came up, and the people netted them and killed them, and it said, while the meat was yet between their teeth, the Lord struck them. And God showed his great displeasure in their lusting after meat, and that was the lesson they learned in the valley called sin. Now, they also complained about not having any onions or leeks or garlics to eat. And, this kind of thing went on, and God kept showing his displeasure. Well, the fascinating thing about this is, in the very strict Brahma Surya Sampradaya of Vaishnavism, we see that specifically they don't eat any onions, leeks, or garlics, no meat, fish, or fowl, and especially also we note no leavened bread. I've had the interesting experience of having Vaishnava priests tell me, that anything but this flat bread or unleavened bread was a very, very evil thing to eat, and under no circumstances would any self-respecting strict Vaishnava eat raised breads as we eat here in the West. So there seems to be a pretty amazing relationship here between that particular period of time and some of the Vaishnava practices. Okay, I'm done. Since you're not coming back, I want to say something else. Also, in the sacrificial system, the animals which are allowed for sacrifice are called clean animals, are also those animals in the Vaishnava system which are considered to be mode of goodness animals, offerable to Vishnu, the god of the mode of goodness. And they include the mode of goodness animals on the air, in the air, and on the land and the sea, so that mode of passion animals like carnivores cannot be sacrificed, and mode of ignorance animals like omnivores, which eat garbage or waste products and so forth, also cannot be sacrificed. So that amongst animals, a pig is not offerable, and so forth. Amongst the sea creatures, only those that swim at the top can be offered, and not any of the bottom feeders, like fish that have no scales, or lobsters, or any kind of shellfish like that. And in the air, only the animals, mode of goodness animals, which are seed eaters and not carnivorous birds like eagles and so forth. So there's this also very strict definition of what is offerable and not offerable, even in the animal kingdom, as far as the kosher law is concerned, and Vaishnavism. Okay, so we see here the division of the animals into the modes of goodness, passion, and ignorance. Vishnu presides over the mode of goodness out of the three gunas, or modes of material nature, and the animals which are offerable to him, birds in the air, and the land, and the sea, are only those which are animals in the mode of goodness, according to kosher law, not animals which are omnivores or carnivores. And a footnote to this is that in the religions of the mode of passion, the mode of ignorance, in the mode of passion, they sacrifice often animals as so-called totems of the family, great cats or eagles or something of that nature. And in the mode of ignorance, they even sacrifice animals that are omnivores and stool eaters and things like dogs and pigs and such like that. So everything in the world is considered to be a greater or lesser mixture of the three modes of material nature, including all the plants and all the animals. And the offerings are in the different religions, in the modes of goodness, passion, and ignorance, are also associated with the different kinds of offerings made. In the sacrificial system, originally in Exodus and Leviticus, the sacrificed animals are only to be selected from the flocks of the designated priest clan, whose task was to eat the sins of the people. We see the karmic connection here. They were to eat the sacrificial animal the same day it was offered. It was not allowed to be eaten by any others except the family of priesthood whom the animal was, of whose flock the animal was selected. It was not to be transported by anyone for the priesthood to eat it. It had to be eaten within the enclosure before the end of that particular day. And it was stated clearly in the Old Testament that it was the curse or the duty of the priesthood to consume the sins, to take the sins of the people by eating of the sacrificial victim. So it's clear also from the different types of sacrifices that were made that there were the thanks offerings and the sin offerings, and that to consume part of the sacrificed animal was associated with taking some people's karma. All these rules correspond to Vaishnava doctrines regarding the karma attached to flesh eating. For instance, Vaishnava is not to transport or prepare or in any way involve themselves with meat even, to the extent that they are not to even raise an animal that may be slaughtered. Again, we see the rule about the animals for sacrifice being only provided by the priestly clan whose duty it is to take the karma of the sacrifices. The Nazarites were the ritually pure devotees separated from the lay masses by baptism. These were in the Narayana or Naharayam or Pancharatram type cult that practiced the ritual ablutions. They wholly rejected the participation in the sacrificial system and abstained from all flesh sacrifice or flesh eating. And their contention, it appears, was that there was no place in the system provided for the lay masses to eat of these sacrifices and therefore become hopelessly polluted from the karma attached with them. So the Nazarites did not participate in the ritual sacrifices at the temple and didn't eat any sacrificed animal. And since everything that is eaten must be offered to God, and therefore, since they didn't eat sacrificed animals, that was the duty of the branch of the priesthood. In order to do that, therefore they didn't eat any animals. The Nazarites were vegetarians like other Helios cult members such as the Platonists. It's well known that the Stoics and the various ascetic philosophers, the Orphics and the Pythagoreans, as well as the Platonists and the Socratics and so forth, were all, again, that term ascetic. Even into Christian asceticism has been transmitted the practice of abstaining from all flesh foods for the religious of the order. These sacramental meals were eaten by the Spartans, the Nazarites, the Qumran sect, many different Gnostic orders, and all the Helios and cult members of the Greeks and the Egyptians and the Hebrew, again, Nazarites. These sacramental meals contained no fish or fowl or other animal products, flesh meat of any kind, when the rest of the sect was ascetic, as it were. That means abstaining also from drink, like the Nazarites abstained from the use of alcohol, and they were celibates often, and also did not involve themselves in any kind of gambling, which was very popular in the Mediterranean at that point in time. So these are the four pillars of the religious life in Vaishnavism: no meat eating, no illicit sex, no intoxication, and no gambling. And we see that these were held in common with the Greek ascetics, with the Nazarites and other Gnostic groups, as well as a lot of different Egyptian groups, which were just as other Mediterranean groups were later or earlier offshoots of the major faith, the major right-hand tantric Hari cult, original one in the area. Presently, the law in Nepal and Israel is observed in the same way regarding Sabbath. There's bank closures, and in South India, there are an awful lot of Vaishnavas that observe Saturday as a Sabbath. And in both places, Nepal and South India, it's a day sacred to Vishnu or Krishna. I talked to the head of the government, His Majesty's Government Archaeological Department in Nepal when I was there, regarding the observance of Saturday Sabbath and the use of the Sri Yantra, which is associated in Mahayana Buddhism with Tara, and the frequent association of these Mahayana Buddhist symbols and so forth with Vaishnavism. And he told me that the worship of that the use of the Sri Yantra and that the observance of the Saturday Sabbath was associated with the Krishna-Vishnu cult, and that the stories in Nepal associated it with a number of different myths about Sani or Sanibram, who is the son of the sun. Now, if one is to confuse Surya, the demigod of the sun, with Surya, Krishna under solar Vishnuism, then it would be very easy to consider Saturn or Sani the son of Helios or Hari, because Surya is a by-name, or Suvar is a by-name of Hari. Sani or Sani, which means something like slowly moving, it's an epitaph of Saturn, is a name not only of Saturn but also of Vishnu. The sidereal or star time cycle of Saturn was the longest one, I think, that the ancients had observed. And the planet of Saturn was considered to be the eldest of the gods or demigods born of the sun, and these children of the sun were considered to be respectfully circumambulating their father, so that the sun, of course, was the father, the Prajapati, the origin of all planets in the solar system, and as such, he is the father or the spiritual master. He received instruction directly from Krishna, and also he received instruction from Brahma, according to some Vaishnava tradition. So that's why sometimes it's referred to the Brahma Surya Sampradaya of Vaishnavism. And again, the Sani or Saturn is considered the son of the sun. And we saw earlier that in the Helios cult, Saturn, or the seventh day, was actually sacred to Helios. Of course, the Sunday is named for Helios, but it's interesting to note that the seventh day is also his sacred day. as observed in Sabbatine privilege, for instance, in the Catholic tradition. This was the sacred day of Kronos, of Yah, Saturn or Zervan, Zeus, Jupiter, Ammon, Sabazios, or Baal Haman. The ancients said, many different independent sources confirm that Saturn was the patron deity of the Jews. And of course, the Jews at different times response would have been, well, that was offensive that they didn't worship Saturn because they had become disconnected from the idea that their 7-day week had anything at all to do with planets. Even though the Urim and Thummim and early scholarship on early Judaism will confirm that the worship of their deity had everything in the world to do with the 7-day week and the planets, which were associated with the 7 days of the week. Saturday is sacred to Juno Satyreia, or Mary, as I mentioned, the Sabbatine privilege, and this is all associated with the exceptional mercy of the Shakti, or feminine aspect of the deity, and her petition to the deity to go to hell, descend into the hells to save the fallen souls there. And I described elsewhere, I believe, the importance of the Tulasi, or sacred basil, in relationship to this. In the Old Testament, associated with bridal mysticism, Queen Sabbath, as we see, Sabbath here is personified as feminine, which relates it again to Satyreia, a name of Juno, and as Jupiter is Saturnus, again, in other words, the doctrine, the idea that in fact Saturn is a form of Jupiter. And that's the masculine, and here we have Juno as Satyreia. Satyreia, again, being a byname of the sacred basil plant. So we see here the connection from Rome to Christianity with Mary and the Sabbatine privilege to back to the ancient Hebrew, where the Shakti in the Sabbath, the Lord, was personified as his beloved, and Queen Sabbath. And there are kind of like love poems in the bridal mysticism related to the Yahweh being the bridegroom, the lover of Queen Sabbath. Number 11 in Hebrew is a Chadasur, or a Chadasar. It also means, because this here in Hebrew means servant, and achad means one. It also means, number one, servant. This means tin and servant. In Vaishnavism, dasi, or dasa, the masculine, means servant, but it also means tin. So this is an important point. Ekadasi, with the feminine end of it anyway, this is the mother of devotion, so to speak. Eka, like the achad, the D, means one. And here, asi, but the masculine is asa, also means servant on the end of a Vaishnava name, like asar here. So that the Sanskrit word akadasar, or akadasa, dasa, with a masculine ending, means number one, servant, and it also means 11 because in Sanskrit we find the same pun. It seems like there's a contraction that's been broken up here improperly, or somehow or other, by one or the other group, so that we have ekadasa in the Sanskrit would mean 1 and 10, or 11, and also number one, servant. In the Hebrew. In the Sanskrit, ekadasa, the masculine, would be number one, servant, and 1 plus 10 is 11. And the whole thing, also, this is kind of an interesting thing, because the whole business about tithing. so that they take a tenth of everything. 1 out of 10 of everything is in the service of the Lord. Number 1, Dasi, feminine servant, she's the mother of devotion, Ekadasi, and is a particular day that is observed by many, some days, 2 days in a row, as Ekadasi and Dvadasi, Dva being 2, with the lunar cycle. It's calculated by the lunar cycle. And the Jews observed lunar-related Sabbaths or holidays, rest days, 1 day in Jerusalem, and 2 days when they were far from Jerusalem. When they would count days from I think the new moon, and when they had a very, very long distance, they had to use signal fires. They used signal fires to transmit messages very long distances in those days. And when they had a very long distance, because where people were not very good at keeping track of time, because they were so afraid of observing Ekadasi or the lunar-related monthly fast days on the wrong day or missing the observance of it because it was very important to them, they would observe 2 days of special fasting and prayer, calling it as you see the Sanskrit here, the Vaishnava tradition of some Vaishnavas observing Ekadasi and Dvadasi because of probably something related to the same reason. They want to be sure that they're observing the proper time, and so they extend it a little bit. And similarly, the Jews extended this particular festival when they were a certain distance away from Jerusalem, because their timekeepers were at the temple in Jerusalem, and they wanted to be sure that they were not missing observance of the right time. There are a number of shilas or stones that were worshipped in the aniconic or pre-iconic era in the East and West, and those called shalagram shilas are from the village of Shalagram, which was in a forest of shal trees or by-forest of shal trees on a river bank. I've heard at the confluence of the Gandaki and the Ganga, according to one source. When I went to Nepal, I made a trip to the confluence of the Gandaki, the Trasuli, and the Bagmati, which flows through Kathmandu. And I traveled some distance down the Gandaki River, hoping to see places where the Shalagram Shilas are found, the various Shilas. I was unable to descend in the river, course, though, because of the great steepness of the bank where I was closest to it. But the temple of Pasupadinath in Nepal and other places in Nepal sell these Shilas. People come all the way from very far away in India to buy the Shilas, especially the Shalagram Shila, and for domestic worship and temple worship in India. I went to many marketplaces and temples and talked to many pujaris or priests about the Shilas that were worshipped, and tried to understand what they were exactly, and to see or photograph any if I could. And the ones that I saw, which are called the Shalagram Shilas, which are all aniconic forms of Hari and his solar associated aspect. One is a stone, it's a fossil snail, which the banding of which appears like a horn of Ammon. Of course, the Ammon as a ram, as in the Old Testament, the story of Abraham and Isaac, this sacrifice, is associated with Zeus or Jupiter of escapes, where the Lord offers himself as for the vicarious atonement of the sins of the offerer. And just as the ram appeared to Abraham, its horns caught in the bush. And the story of Phrixus, where the Lord appeared as a miraculous golden ram and said, "Take me, flee on my back." And then when they reached the grove of Mars, he said, "Now sacrifice me to Mars," and so forth. The other really important form of the Shalagram Shila is another fossil that has a kind of a cross section of a creature which creates a sunburst pattern, sunburst pattern, and that looks like the rays of the sun, and that's a very important Shila. These are called the Ammonites. And they were probably the form of Zeus Petrus, or the stone, that was worshipped before the Koros Kore sculpture was introduced into Greece. And they were dressed and offered food and everything just like the Shalagram Shilas are in the temples today. And two other kinds of Shilas that I saw, or three kinds, one with lots of little fossils in it, kind of nondescript, one that had a big hole, cut holes in them, slices or gaps in them, and one type that has a lot of small holes running through it. And I didn't get any explanation what was the particular significance of those, but they were all called Shalagram Shilas and all worshipped like Zeus Petrus. There's also the egg-shaped stone, which is called Hiranyagarbha. If it's a golden or yellow translucent type of a quartz, for instance, or a jasper, the Hiranya is the golden egg, which is the beginning of the universe, so to speak, in some of the traditions. And then another Ananta Shila, which symbolizes Balaram or Yah as Shesha. This particular one, we'll just use the same drawing here, is just a very round or smooth. It's a white stone, and in the New Testament it's said that Jesus' name, secret name that no one knows except to whom it's especially revealed, is revealed or is known in the white stone. And of course Balaram is the white stone, or the Ananta Shila that is form that he's worshipped in. Just as these, I might mention, are a black stone, invariably, at least the ones coming out of the Gandaki are. And there's one other Ananta Shila that I inquired about, but I was never able to find an example of, and they say it's a smooth oval stone that is white with a brown mottling. And I don't know why it has that particular feature, but it is also worshipped as an Ananta Shila. The fossil scallop and the scallop and the conch shell are all used in Vaishnava services, or in the West, in ablution services, to pour holy water for sanctification. The shal tree, most specifically acacia tree, as I've been able to find out, sometimes Shorea robusta, sometimes the betel tree actually too, and betel palm, less usual. Usually it's the shal is a term used for an acacious or a pseudo-acacious type of tree that is large and has very valuable wood for building, and has a resin or a pitch or sap that has medicinal or other uses, and has very sharp thorns. In the Old Testament, it's called shittim, and it's the tree most sacred to Yahweh. Everything in His sanctuary is made out of this acacious wood, and it's also sometimes it's said that it's the wood that the ark was made out of, and the Ark of the Covenant was made out of it. And it's just extremely sacred to Vishnu, and it is the sacred tree of, again, Osiris or Purusha, Usur. And it's the tree that his Jagannath type form is made out of, or the Jajanetra form, and that he was in the trunk of when he floated up on the island of Byblos. And this story is all related to the round of stories about Jagannath, how once he appeared as the Brahman Daru, or this tree of Brahman, and floated up on the shore of a pious king and so forth. Anyway, the fire stick sets for making fire by friction that were used both by the Egyptian priesthood and used by the Purohitas of the ancient Brahma, Surya, or Vishnu cult with its fire sacrifices. The fire was always kindled by friction from these fire-making sets made of acacious or other very, very pseudo-acacious, perhaps hardwood. And this particular, being called the Brahman Daru, or the tree of Brahman, is related to this fact, and also to the fact that it seems to be immortal, in the sense that they used to say that the tree in Egypt, to say this was a symbol of Osiris, because one could cut down the tree and could trim it as a post, cut all the bark off, and then stick it in the ground, and it would still grow. So it's a symbol of immortality, and it's also a symbol of the immanent spirit of God, because simply by rubbing two pieces of it together, fire can be produced. Now, as an aniconic form, gold, of course, was synonymous with Hari, and was reserved for the use of the deity and the sacred king. Eventually, anyway, any golden yellow or yellow-shaped shaded thing was also considered a reminder or a symbol of the Lord, of Lord Hari, the sun, even to the extent that things that had any yellow in them, practically, even if it was a greenish yellow or an orange yellow, or if it was a reddish yellow animal, or a deer or a lion or anything of that nature. There are just many animals that end up having the name Hari because they are thought to remind one of the deity. These various Greek and Roman sources are ones that I have used in collecting information on slave ownership and religion, and slave marking, and asyla, and all of the different temples and groups that were related to the various asyla, amphitonic, and Delphic type of leagues and federations which occurred over the centuries between people who worshipped at the temples related to Hari or Helios. And you can notice that, for instance, with the Greek names, as in Rhodius or Apollodorus and so forth, on the end here, Doris actually is a little different, but the us or osha or os or s on the end of all these Greek names, being a masculine suffix, actually indicates the usur, or the pervasive spirit, as in the Sanskrit ush or vas or as, and as in the Hebrew Eliyahu or Elias, so to speak, IAS on the end. It's actually a form of the name Yah on the end, or Yah or Usur or Ush, the supreme deity, and it's just like the feminine suffix. It reflects the doctrine that actually all the jiva souls are expansions, minute jiva, infinitely small or finite expansions or manifestations of the Supreme Lord, and in this case masculine, and of course then there's the feminine suffix. And this is doctrine, ancient understanding, is really reflected in many different of the living languages that have a masculine and a feminine for practically everything. In particular, when we see DES on the end of a Greek name, it's there exactly, it functions the same as the DAS on the end of a Sanskrit name where it means das. So, and it means either son or servant of. It's the masculine. Also, you can see so many of these names reflect the like Rhodius and Apollo and so forth. Association with the Helios cult, Dionysus and so forth. Homer and Hesiod. An important point to make about this is that the reading of Homer, the actual origin of our main ideas about Greek religion is Homer and Hesiod. And, of course, during the 5th century BC and so forth, the major popular idea about the gods popular concepts were derived from Homer and Hesiod. And this was a source of great unhappiness to the Pythagoreans and the Platonists and the various members of the actual initiated orders. In fact, Plato wanted to have a law passed prohibiting the reading of Homer in Greece. And the argument against Homer was that he was not a spiritual master, he was not an initiate, and his fanciful stories simply blasphemed all the gods and God, and his reading transmission of his stories was destroying Greek civilization, or the religion of the people. And Hesiod didn't fare much better either. His stories about the gods were also not considered bona fide at all, because actually by the time of Homer and Hesiod, the earlier Asila Federation of temples and the dominance of the religion and so forth had been destroyed with the various during the various times in which the left-hand tantrics and the Mayavadis or monists became powerful, to the point that, and during the Assyrian domination in the Near East, to the point that it was only those in the initiated order, the very highly educated persons who really understood the doctrines and practices very much, and maybe a handful of especially pious people. Other than that, the lay masses of the Mediterranean had fallen pretty much into a lot, just like the masses of India today, and most Christians, unfortunately, fallen into a lot of kind of idolatrous practices, real materialism and ungodly pursuits of all different kinds. They were really more servants of the world than they were servants of God, and didn't really understand theology or much of anything else religious. Some of the sources here, like Herodotus, of course, traveled very widely and had a great interest in things religious, but were apparently initiates, and because they had very strong feelings about revealing things that were supposed to be for initiates only, when they went to places like Egypt and gave account of the people and the religions there, when they approached subjects that were near and dear to their hearts as far as the mysteries were concerned, they would always make some disclaimer, statement, like Herodotus would frequently make in his histories, saying, I can't talk about this particular subject because or the deity that's involved with this I can't mention because it's taboo to do so. And out of respect, he refused to do it. Of course, some of these writers are a lot later than others, but this is just to give you a general idea of the great number of sources, which are source works, which are still existing today, and which can be used to establish the various points that I've been making. A lot of the writings of the Stoics, like Seneca, are extremely important in our appreciation of their attitude, difference in attitude between the masses and these initiated people in regard to issues like slavery. The Stoics were always arguing against cruel and unusual punishment, and always arguing against the race theory of slavery, and for the idea that there was really no difference in human beings, and that a person born a slave could be a noble, and a person that was noble could be an absolute demon. So they represent the Vaishnava position as opposed to the racist caste Brahmin type of position that we see very prevalent in India even today. Here we see again the DES on the end of a name, and the on the Greek names again. So often the ES, US, the masculine suffixes, and also a thing to note is that we find an awful lot of important material even in plays. Besides the works of the great historians, we can use letters and inscriptions and the writings of politicians and playwrights and so forth, to our tremendous advantage in understanding all of these different issues which are central to the subject of the relationship between the Saila Federation of Temples in the West and the Vaishnavas and the Mahayana Buddhists in the East. Along with these ancient Greek and Roman sources, when we study the intertestamental literatures, the early church fathers, and the Egyptian and Hebrew sources and rabbinical tradition, we have just an incredible amount of eyewitness testimony to the existence of this one faith at that time.